I'm Cynthia Schneider, and I have a wonderful panel who I am going to kind of ignore now and really focus on all of you. And I think that you've had enough talking at you, and we'd like to hear some feedback from you and additional questions from you, maybe also to each other. I'll just throw out a couple of topic areas that we haven't touched on yet, and maybe you have some experience or ideas in those areas that you'd like to talk about. And if not, if you have something else, that's fine. But this is just possibly to get the conversation going. One area that hasn't been talked about so much is cultural diplomacy and conflict resolution, social diplomacy and transitional justice. And this is an area where theater and cultural diplomacy come very close together. There's a brand new anthology, 2 books out, called Acting Together on the World Stage. This is slightly me trying to answer a question that someone asked me, and I cannot remember who it is, so I'm telling everyone. They were asking me about this book, edited by Cynthia Cohen, which has wonderful case studies of theater as a vehicle to heal wounds of conflict. I highly recommend it. And there's also theater, the line between some of the truth and reconciliation activities and theater and performance can sometimes be very, very thin. These things can be done as a civil society action, as, for example, the Dodd Theater in Belgrade acting in the town square to try to show people about the atrocities being committed then by the Serbian army when it wasn't being discussed. Or it can be a whole high-level state operation, such as, for example, in Australia, when the Prime Minister made the official apology to the Aboriginal people for the stolen children generation. And that official apology was accompanied by a ritual performance by some of the members of the tribe. So it can be informal, just a few people in a little village providing a space for people to air their grievances and tell their stories, or it can be a high-level official thing. So there's that area. That's also an area where you can work in cultural diplomacy, which I know many of you have those questions. And there is the kind of, that I'm aware of, but I'm sure there are European examples. Signature organization is called Search for Common Ground, based in Washington, D.C., and works all over the world and is really the pioneer of media for social justice. Another kind of subset where cultural diplomacy can be important is the area of women's rights and empowering women, where again, performance, film, music can be very important. One of the preeminent organizations of this type, Vital Voices, has had great success touring a play called Seven, and it's just 7 women's stories told by actors, but of famous women. So that's another example of how you can use cultural diplomacy to advance in a particular area. So I wonder if you all have any thoughts or any experience, perhaps from your own background where you live, of or experiences you've even had here over the past few days of cultural diplomacy in the context of conflict resolution or maybe advocating a particular cause. Yes? And you can bring up other subjects too. This is just to get the conversation going.
Hi, I'm Zachary Gallant. I'm a Fulbright scholar in post-conflict redevelopment, focusing on the former Yugoslavia. One of the big problems that I've noticed in cultural diplomacy and the international community is hypocrisy and rhetoric in the international community. And it's rampant. It runs through all forms of international organizations. And I wanted to focus on last night. I wanted to focus on the reaction to the Greek protesters, who I don't necessarily agree with. I don't know enough about the situation to agree or disagree, but I do know that we are the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy, and I know that we should have given, Lord Jack McConnell gave them a great opportunity to speak, but then they were violently, their signs were torn away, they were violently removed from the premises, and I felt that that was sort of the opposite of cultural diplomacy. There was no chance for the Greek deputy prime minister to respond. There was no chance for a real debate. So I'd just like to get that addressed, that we are cultural diplomats, and we should have, that was a teachable moment, as Nadina Feyesh said earlier in her presentation. So I just wonder if we could have done better and how the international community can do better.
I would like to answer you, if possible, because I stopped this this moment. This event is a closed event. Those people were not allowed to go inside, and they simply trespassed the door here and went inside and simply ruined the event of the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy when we discussed something else. We didn't discuss Greece. We didn't discuss anything else. So first of all, they did something that simply broke the law. And you can protest, and I'm for this. You can protest and you can do whatever you want, but you cannot really hurt anybody else. So that's the first thing. And you know that if we had called the police, they could have been arrested, because they simply break the law. That's the first thing. Now, the second thing that I want to say is the fact that somebody has different opinion, and the Deputy Prime Minister probably has different opinion, and probably maybe he did something that made them angry. It's not me to decide. There is a way, and this is what we are trying to do here in the ICD, there is a way to protest, there is a way to express your opinion, and this needs to be only through dialogue, understanding, and trust. Even if you think that this Deputy Prime Minister, their Deputy Prime Minister, legally elected, by the way, did something wrong, there is a way to discuss this. And the fact that we didn't let them speak is only for this reason, that we believe that a dialogue should be held in the right way. We will, of course, not I must tell you that if the Deputy Prime Minister had come here to the ICD and had come with some kind of, let's say, a sheet in his hands and put this sheet, instead of those students, I would have done the same. But that's the only thing I want to say. Thank you.
Are there follow-up comments? Thank you, Riemann. Are there follow-up comments on that? Sure.
Hi, I'm Marianne. By now you guys know me. But I just wanted to point out that, again, like hypocrisy, but when it was mentioned about the atrocities by the Serbian army, yes, they did commit atrocities, and yes, it was very bad. But also did the Bosnians, so did the Croats, so did the Kosovars. So we should take it as nobody's perfect. Well, no, I didn't want to say that. I just wanted to point that out, the hypocrisy.
Are you
behind it.
referring to my introduction?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, well, I don't believe I said that those were the only atrocities ever committed. I'm just not familiar with a theater company trying specifically to bring this to light in those companies. I am familiar with the one that existed in Belgrade.
Okay.
Are there, well, let's see if there are more follow-up comments related to the issue here. I think we should get all those and then we can move on.
Hi, my name is Diana. I'm from Hungary, and I just would like to get back to the previous topic. And I just wanted to say that I believe that the most important thing in cultural diplomacy is that how you react in such highly unexpected situations. I mean, I totally agree with all you said, Liman, with all you said, but it was an unexpected situation, and I don't think that it was handled diplomatically or properly, adequately, professionally. It happened, and regardless of whether our Greek friends' behavior was appropriate or not, the result is the same. And the real challenge is how we tackle such situation and such problematic situations nicely and professionally. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Okay, as I said, this is, I said it to all of, most of my colleagues, this is your opinion and I respect that. It's fair to answer like that. I just want to add one more thing, that you don't know it, but in 95, I came from Israel, and in 95, actually all over 94, it started in 93, after the peace, the Oslo peace agreement with Palestine. There were a lot of young people that took those sheets and going all around the country and said all kind of bad things about Yitzhak Rabin, who was the prime minister. 2 years after that, one of the people that really thought that they are right took a gun and also shot him. Now, I don't say, that this every time it will come to this situation, but there must be some kind of a respectful and let's say in a way, also to protest. That is all. The protest. Why you don't say anything wrong about them? I agree, that maybe I should have come here to give them a cup of coffee and tell them maybe you can sit down and have some kind of, let's say, good time here in our event and continue to ruin our event, your event that you paid for this money. And instead of that, you are just saying that I was not diplomatic when I simply told them, please, I simply took it away and simply told them to leave. That's it. But I will not react on this anymore. As I said, this is only my opinion, and that's it.
Sorry, may I just ask one? Okay. Yesterday, all day, we had been talking about the importance of the fact that we have 2 years and 1 month. And when it came to re-election, I didn't feel personally that we have 2 years and 1 month because we didn't listen to them. It happened, but we didn't listen to them.
Re-election? Yeah, I know.
So I'm actually butting in, but we'll give it to you. I'm just going to point out now, because I think it's really important, that when it happened, the moderation, they did get to say their piece in totem. They got to say it completely. And then we did get a response from the Deputy Prime Minister. And then they were trespassing. And then they were removed. And I personally thought that it was handled very well. And they were listened and all opinions were given. And then people who trespassed and you guys all paid money to be here were taken out. So that's just what I think.
Yes, and I also agree with what you just said, Tom. And in the end, they didn't raise a critical point about the topic we are talking about, but they raised awareness, and therefore they didn't come here to critically express their opinion, but they came here to raise awareness on their cause. And I think there's a time and space to do that, but as this is a private event and not publicly on TV or publicly in a square or somewhere, I think it was kind of the wrong action for the wrong place, and they could have done it in a public meeting or something, then they would also have reached people. On the other hand, I think that also this gives us a lesson in cultural diplomacy and how we have to be diplomatic about cultural diplomacy and also about protest culture in that sense. Because, just one example, when there was a nuclear catastrophe in Fukushima in Japan after the earthquake, I was surprised that there was hardly any protest in Japan on this topic. On the other hand, in Germany, we had mass protests, and in the end, we actually decided to shut down our nuclear plants earlier.
Just to clarify, you had mass protests in Germany about the explosion in Japan.
About that and about security concerns that in Germany we might have the same catastrophe, and therefore first the government just decided to extend the nuclear plants, and now they decided to take this decision back, so we closed the nuclear plants earlier, and they also closed down the oldest ones already. So I think we also have to keep in mind that protest culture and the way how you express your opinion is really different in different kinds of the world. And if we talk about cultural diplomacy and being cultural in a really international sense to everyone, we have to be especially careful how we express ourselves and how we interact with each other. And I think the incident yesterday is also a way that how fragile diplomacy can be and how easily things which are perceived as a act of freedom of speech can be seen as being really offensive or even aggressive and unfair. So I think we have to be especially careful in how we interact in order to make cultural diplomacy to work. Thank you.
Thank you for those wonderful examples of how different people see things differently and that kind of perception can be reality. That's very useful. Go there, and then we've got a couple people here, and I know you're interested too.
Hi, good evening. My name's Katharina. I'm from Germany.
Can you put the mic a little closer? Thank
Okay,
you.
sorry. Okay, I also wanted to comment on the event last night. I think that this is not about blaming anyone. There's also a question whether there actually is a perfect solution to a situation like that, because we were not prepared for anything like that to happen. And also, I think what we've been discussing here is within the context like of an ideal bubble of intellectuals, scholars, politicians, coming together to discuss great ideas about cultural diplomacy. But as we witnessed last night, the practice is something completely different. And I think you'll never be 100% prepared in order to meet such challenges. But that's exactly what this is all about. We can't stay on the level of theory. And we've had lectures on dance as a medium of that's that's closer to the population in general, maybe. And I think, yeah, we need to find another solution to deal with events like last night. And also, we've been talking a lot about cultural diplomacy as a mean of interaction between different states representing different cultures. But we've also been talking about just using cultural diplomacy as a bridge to get over the gap that's between different sectors of society, maybe different cultures between or within the society of one country. And I think that's also what we witnessed last night. We can practice maybe cultural diplomacy on the level of government, but this was between government and its society itself. And I think there you really have to find dialogue. And that should have ideally been more respectful from all sides. And you have to find a space and time where you can actually mention all these facts and really come to a solution, or at least to listen to each other and to make everyone feel worshipped in their opinion and accepted as a human being with their own background. Thank you.
Okay, we have 2 comments here.
Thank you very much. Here on ICD, we had the discussion again before, all the staff. We had a very interesting panel discussion. Everyone can watch it on YouTube on our own channel. It was about protests, if they are a form of freedom of expression or a form of violence. And I would like to say just that. Democracy, one of the main principle of democracy is freedom and freedom of expression. But we have all to remember that freedom doesn't mean to pass on other person's freedom. So I think diplomacy should be also about that. The empathy, always to remember that your freedom doesn't mean that you have the right to pass on other person's freedom. And when it comes to freedom of speech, you can always do that. Protests, strikes are totally legal, are part of our democratic world we are living in, as long as they don't pass other freedom, like and other rights, like the right of property here, or other rights that can be passed. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Just to carry on in the same.
Yeah.
Just
Just hold it close to your mouth.
Just to carry on in the same kind of theme, I actually totally agree with what Delia has just said. But one thing I would say is it's a shame that we didn't actually get to, if the protesters had come to the ICD, come to the management here, and spoken to us and said, we would like to sit down with the Deputy Prime Minister, or maybe, have some kind of dialogue, then that could be something we may have been able to arrange. It really is a shame that they didn't approach us in this way, because this is exactly what we're about. We bring people together like this conference, and we would love to try and sit people down, especially on 2 opposing sides, and get them to talk. And essentially, their protest, I don't think anybody was against it, and they're almost preaching to the converted, because we agree with you. So it's, you have your right to say whatever you want. So it's really a shame they just didn't go about it in a different way. I think that was just maybe a bit of a problem.
Ahmed?
Thank you. My name is Ahmed, and I'm coming from Egypt. I think that the topic that we're raising is cultural diplomacy versus conflict resolution is
conflict resolution.
In conflict resolution, yeah.
It's not a conflict between
I know, but it's a kind
resolution.
of of two different faces for one coin. I mean, if it's going to be turned, it's going to have the other, totally the contradicting output. And it's the same thing also with dialogue and debate, where dialogue is like a two-way of communication where everybody try to listen to the other part. But the debate is, it's also two-way of communication, but everybody would try to prove his or her point of view. So I just wanted to say that it might be the case that there is nothing in between. It's just, it could be easily turned out to totally other contradicting output, whereas the cultural diplomacy is very, very close to having the other way around of conflict. So this is what I want to comment.
Okay. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sanela. I would like to say, when we are in a conflict, the conflict is something that come out of the fear, and fear come out of the lack of knowledge. So I would like to say one thing. We are all one, and maybe if we worked for each other really from the heart, we can find same language. And when we're talking about cultural diplomacy, the first thing in my mind is art. Art is universal language, which brings people together. And when I'm angry at somebody, I go and get paintings. And in the end of the year, I have so many paintings, I make an exhibition. So what I'm trying to say is that to understand other cultures, we have to understand their religions, their past, their thoughts. And when we are talking about culture, really, 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 we have to search for their art. Art can tell us a history of humankind. And what I wanted to say in the end is, we are one. We live on the same planet. So maybe the walls can fall if everybody have same thoughts that I do.
Thank you. I love the idea of the anger exhibition. I love the anger exhibition. Do you put a little label about who made you angry to buy that painting?
Well, I paint faces, so everybody can actually see their faces then. I made 4 so far. I made 4 so far, and one you can see it in Artsland in New York.
Oh boy,
So
well, we're going to be there.
We should make our friend angry very frequently so that she produces more paintings. On the limits of the utilization of the cultural diplomacy, yesterday's event between the Greek Deputy Prime Minister and the charming lady coming from Greece could teach us perhaps something that we shouldn't be doing. What is this? If cultural diplomacy is going to be used like the one which was used yesterday, then it will not produce the expected result. Why? To begin with, she entered here, without authorization, but I leave it aside. I don't know whether you followed until the last word she said. She finished her statement by saying, "Long live the strike of the trade unions on the industrial steel workers." I wonder whether when you talk to someone in such a forum, in a forum where cultural diplomacy is discussed, you finish your intervention with these words. This is not a statement. This is a propaganda, political propaganda, and its place is not here. If she was to finish her statement in something that looks for a conciliation, for a common ground with her interlocutor, then we could consider this as a means of cultural diplomacy. And you may have seen also that the incident yesterday is already in the internet. So it was pre-staged with the cameras, etc., ready, and then it unfolded according to their expectation. If the ICD allows the repetition of that type of things, most probably it may tarnish its reputation, and also its functions may be limited. Thank you.
Okay, you had a question there, and then we'll go back there. Thank you. Right there, right behind you there.
Testing. Hello. I'm Edwin from Hong Kong. Actually, I like the point that you mentioned how you can have a global influence of like the protest culture. Actually, one thing to share with all of you is like a few months ago, a prestigious travel magazine, or I'm not so sure if it's the Lonely Planet or something, would recommend Hong Kong as a travel city or something for tourists, shopping, food, and something. But at the end, they also point to the protest culture of Hong Kong, and they recommend it on the magazine. And the government and the tourist board all respond like they could not make sense of this recommendation. Why would you recommend the protest culture in Hong Kong? But actually, the government just didn't like the way they say anything about the protest. But actually, everyone in Hong Kong is pretty proud of it. It's actually part of here, my cultural experience here, and also related to the cultural diplomacy debates, like how the culture of protest, which is a form of freedom of expression, and also more fundamental, it's one of the fundamental values of the Western society, open society, is that it's really a lessons for people like me from other places. Like it's like the protest yesterday, or actually it's just I'm always impressed by. So we have so many former head of state, prime minister here. Without, if in China or Hong Kong you will have dozens of security guards and police everywhere, you will not be allowed to protest. They will cut you off once you stand up or something. But to me, it's one cultural experience here that the protest culture allowed here and everywhere spreading it's really an experience for me. I just want to share that with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that insight. That is absolutely fascinating, the idea of protest culture. So it has, as a tourism incentive, and is that campaign continuing? And did the government shut it down, or is it continuing?
We just have regular protests on many things. I mean, it's just the same with many countries. I've been in London. I mean, London's always have protest, strike, and I just want to add one point, like the trade union relations with, not just between government and government, but society with societies. Mm-hmm. That's the essence of cultural diplomacy, in my opinion. Yeah. Between advocacy, protester, trade union, between maybe UK and Hong Kong, they have actually exchanged. We send some of our student society councils member actually visit some other university to visit their student council to see how they organize protests or activities. I mean, that's really one way of cultural diplomacy, to share experience and build up international network.
Absolutely, and it seems to me that let's pass this, with this person here has been waiting. Why don't you pass it back there and go? It seems to me that the meta message of that, my friend Deborah Tannen, who writes the books about linguistics, talks about meta messages. The meta message of that might be, we are not the People's Republic of China. You know, if we are the protest culture, that's also saying something about what Hong Kong isn't, which is interesting. But I love the idea of the government being kind of in conflict of the tourism campaign. And of course, there's now revolutionary tourism in North Africa. That's the latest thing, so go ahead.
Hiya. So going back to, or continuing about what happened yesterday, being from a legal background, I like to kind of cut through the theory sometimes towards the practicality and almost create a judicial review of what happened. I'd like to ask, what did we actually learn from yesterday? Because we're sitting here over theorizing everything, almost like something from a Monty Python sketch, something like, you know, The Life of Brian, where it's not the people of Judea or the Judean People's Front. So what did we learn? A clear example would be, I walked in before the Greek Deputy Prime Minister did his speech, and there didn't seem to be anyone on the door, for example. That would be something that I would have thought we may have learned from yesterday. Or would we have a theory or a plan of action for if someone did something again, how would we handle it? So instead of maybe over-theorizing everything, surely we should sit down and think, how do we actually deal with these things in a practical sense?
You had a question, yeah? Why don't we go just over here, and then we'll go around this side of the room. So you go ahead, and then you go next. Go ahead, you can take the mic over there, and you go ahead and stand up.
Hello. I just think if like 3 weeks ago the exact same event would have happened, let's say in an NGO in London, and it would be President Berlusconi of Italia giving a speech, and people would come in and say something against Mr. Berlusconi, I would say the majority here would cheer this and say, ah, good, they made something, a civil society action. At the same time, we really spoke about Tahrir Square and about, many of us cheer this and say, even though we know all the problem, we know the influence of Muslim Brotherhood. So what I want to say is very often when something happened really far away, we are very easy to say it's great in civil society and good people break the rule. And I mean, I must say what I saw yesterday. It's not the first time in my life I saw this. I mean, I don't think, maybe it's my personal impression, it could have been much worse. So I don't think we should completely see it, okay, now this is a start of a terrorism, as it was also mentioned. So I think we should really understand what we say, what we like when it's not happening here, it's happening here, and then we have to say, okay, now we are on the other side maybe. Maybe now it's us who is angry and say how somebody can break the rules. But when others do it in cases which we haven't know ourselves in it, we act very differently.
Interesting, go ahead. We've kind of lost the introduction thing. May you please say your name and where you're
Tamara
from.
van Kessel of the University of Amsterdam again. I just wanted to, well, I hate to be a spoil sport, but we are talking about cultural diplomacy, and I really like this comment about art. But at the same time, I can't help thinking of when Weimar was a European capital of culture, they had this wonderful exhibition of art that was exhibited in Nazi Germany, which was not the enterzete Kunst, placed beside the art that was accepted under the DDR. And I thought this was very interesting. It was also a very controversial exhibition because they were basically putting these two kinds of art on the same footing. But I mean, however much I believe in the universal language of art and of theater and of music, unfortunately it's not universal in the sense that it's not unpolitical, and art has a very political dimension as well. So I like this idealistic thinking, but because I like it, I also want to be very wary of the political dimension it does have.
Ilza from Kosovo. Yeah, I want to comment about art and music and all of that. It's very nice and it's very cute, but and it's very important. Touches the soul. It's very important, but also it's very symbolic. And in the world of politics, its symbolism doesn't really, and because morality and politics don't really go hand in hand, sorry to state the obvious, just like Honorary Eva Leterme yesterday said, it should be a political will to fix things and to have good relations. And that's why I think we have to hold our politicians and our governments accountable, because sometimes we blame the government saying, oh, well, no, the war was not from, I don't know, Serbia or Germany, it was from the government. We should hold accountable not only in our domestic affairs, but also in our foreign affairs, because how is that saying bad things happen because good people don't react? So holding them accountable is a crucial thing. And maybe that doesn't relate directly to the cultural diplomacy. It does relate to citizen activism, which among all relates to the culture of the country. Thank you.
Okay, we have a comment over here. I went back there, sorry.
Yeah, just a short comment on your point. I think you have a valid point. On the other hand, when it comes to holding politicians accountable, I'm always quite hesitant to do that, because often we see that in the end, politicians are elected by the people, right? If you assume that in a democracy, for example, then the politicians are doing the job which they were promised to do, hopefully, before to the people. So what if people elect politicians to do a certain job, and then in the end want to help them accountable for what they did? Do you understand my point? For example, a lot of people don't say it openly, but imagine a lot of people are quite traditionalist or even right-winged, and then they elect a right-winged government, and they do like racist acts on immigrant population. And then in the end you say, oh my God, that's so bad, now I want you to get punished for it. And I think it's not possible, because in the end they got elected, and in the end a politician is like two persons in one. On the one hand it's an individual, a human being, and on the other hand it's a person doing his job in the end, right? Exactly. So I think when it comes to democracies and holding people accountable, also in the context of cultural diplomacy and having this this civil society who's like more critical on their own government, I think we really have to be really careful when we approach this issue. Thank you.
We have someone back there. Let me just say, I think you're making a very big assumption if you assume that because people are voted in, they represent the people. There are many countries where that's absolutely not true, and the only way that they are held accountable is actually through the media or very often through creative expression, people who write about them. So I think they're, well, I don't. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Eva. I'm from Germany. I was just thinking about the idea of protesting and trying to link it a bit to the idea of theater. When I protest, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to find a way to share a message, maybe all the way even up to the government. And not everyone's able to always articulate everything they want to say in a good way or in the perfect way. And I know when I was a volunteer, the German Development Service had just discovered like theater as a wonderful tool for people who don't always know, for everyone to participate and share messages
But
about.
where is the Development Service? Well,
I was in Uganda, but anyway, it was just inside the Development Service. They had discovered this is a great tool, you know, everyone can share ideas and articulate them in a great way. And I was very moved by this tool in the beginning. I thought it was wonderful. It was a great way for people from different backgrounds to actually communicate through arts, as we've talked about. But what I always thought was sort of sad was that I saw so many young people filled with good ideas, expressing them, and yet I didn't exactly see how this message was going to reach the top. These were people who had finally found a way to actually think about their background, think about something they want to change. And yet I think what is important is the question, demonstrations, we see lots of demonstrations and new tools of how to convey messages, but how can these messages reach the ears that they need to reach? So it was more just to raise a small question.
That's an excellent point. Again, I'd just raise, there's someone back here who has a question too. The more people who hear it, it does happen, such as the Nobel Peace Prize winner.
I'm Phil. I used to be an intern here until a month ago. I wanted to raise 2 points. First, I also wanted to say to Sebastian that we have very, very few functioning democracies on the world. I mean, Germany I would count as one, you know, with nothing is ideal. We have to move away from that perspective. We're experiencing now in Russia maybe the beginning of the Russian winter as an analogy to the Arabian Spring. The Russians have for a long time a majority of the Russians for a long time have not had anyone who represented them. They just voted Putin because he looked better, and every other candidate was basically suppressed for, you know, there's his third term now going to be. And ni tretím, ni dadim, we're not going to give you a third. That was the main message that I read on a lot of forums where I also left a few comments. The other point that I wanted to raise to Dan about how we go about in situations that might arise in the future of this nature by shoving them out of the door. We gave them bullets. That's what we do every time we use violence. We're the Cultural Diplomacy Department. We want to take the bullets away. We want to absorb the shots. We want to make everything slow. We want to slow down the argument so people can think.
Okay, we have a comment back there, and Mark also has a comment, and here and there. So we'll go here, there, and here, there.
Hey, yeah, I also want to come back to Bastian's point that I think I disagree quite significantly that I know that when I go to the voting poll, I put one X in one box, and that's my choice. And certainly, I don't feel that that gives me much democratic power at all. I mean, it's obviously, you know, the first step towards that, but that doesn't mean I've chosen specific policies. That doesn't mean I've voiced really my concerns regarding certain decisions that the government may make or may not make. I've assigned the right to one party or one person, but it's not enough. And I think what's really significant and wonderful about the rise of protests in the last year or so is that, you know, we had become quite stagnant perhaps in our approach, and perhaps too comfortable as well, that you know, everything was very comfortable for a long time, and people had become quite depoliticized, I feel, and I think that that the rise of protests have been a really important part in repoliticizing the youth of today around the world, in order to make democracy really much more workable than it was for quite a long time.
Mark, did you want to go next?
Sure. I just wanted to respond to first the 2 ears and then the math. So in that sense, I appreciate all of the comments that we had. And no, just to throw in my own 2 cents, I think they're really, at the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy, I have a very high tolerance when it comes to freedom of expression. I have a very high tolerance when it comes to different opinions. The one thing where I really don't have tolerance is when it crosses the line of respect. And I think for me, that was the big, I guess, you know, damage last night. Really, I thought it was not done in a respectful way. They were really personally attacking Pangalis, as well as attacking actually the government, etc. So that was the first problem. It reminded me very much of the situation of my home country, the United States, where the Republicans and Democrats, they don't talk, they don't debate, they attack. And it's just really keeping that nation really behind. And I think there it really gets me also frustrated just to see that in my own country. You know, why can't we just have a discourse? And then the second thing, speaking of bullets, that I think was definitely a bullet, was every minute that banner was being held behind him, that was a bullet. As Mr. Yakis said, it's already on the internet, and I think that's not fair. I think, you know, if Pangalis says something and they want to quote him, you know, directly and honestly, fine, okay, then you can publish that in the paper. But that was unfair, and I think that was why it was really important. Who knows what could have come next? I mean, luckily it ended there, and as you know, Roman was saying, obviously, you know, it didn't escalate, that was it. But that's the other thing. So I think it is our job really to protect respect at all levels. And yes, I think it was really our duty to try to do that. And you know, obviously you can never prepare perfectly for these situations, but I think for me, we really have to be sure to protect respect always, especially when dealing with difficult issues, sensitive issues. Of course, that frustration that they expressed was real, and I respect that. I'm sure that was based also on a lot of facts, and I think that I can respect. It was just the way in which they did it was the problem. But anyway, so that's, I think, the challenge with cultural diplomacy, how we can discuss easy issues as well as difficult issues, at least in a respectful way. But of course, the goal is not that we agree or try to have some consensus. So just offering a few thoughts.
Well, Mark, thank you for that clarification. I see a hand up behind you, and someone, you have the mic there. Go ahead, Zach. And I know back there you have a question too, so we'll come to you.
So going back to America and bullets at the same time. No, that's not what I meant. So you look at Occupy, and Occupy was disregarded as a bunch of hippies in the street until the pepper spray came out. Until the state violence came down on Occupy, they were disregarded. They were expressing themselves. They were doing it non-violently, and they were disregarded until state violence happened, until police violence happened, and then people took them seriously. So I believe that last night the protesters were given bullets by being taken that level of seriousness, by being even though they may have started disrespectfully, using force gave them power. So I think that that was a mistake.
You give it to the girl next to you, please. But I have to respectfully disagree with you about the impact of the Occupy Wall Street. I don't think that's true at all. The idea that they have gotten across well before the violence started of the 1% versus the 99% has become one of, if not the defining ideas of the presidential campaign. So I think they've had more influence, actually, than you give them credit for. Well, go ahead, then Tiffany. Go ahead, you're up. That's all right.
I just quickly wanted to state that I guess we can all agree that a dialogue is a two-way street. So even if the other one verbally attacks me, I still have the opportunity to practice my values and actually express my respect and give him or her an opportunity to make her standpoint and also to clarify my point of view of that and really encounter dialogue, find a setting for that. And I think that is actually what could have been possible last night also from the Deputy Prime Minister or just from the setting here itself. Thank you.
Yeah, well, in that regard, you had an off-the-mic moment, which are always interesting and the nightmare of every politician. Tiffany, go ahead.
Along with political
Maybe
science,
the mic just a little closer.
Along with political science, I also study communications. And something that I think is really important to kind of point out here, and something that's kind of been an undertone I've noticed in what people are saying, is the idea that how you represent your message and how you're putting something out there is very important. I know there was an artist in Egypt just recently who released nude photos of herself, stating it as a freedom of expression. And then there was also a play released in the United States several years ago about Dufour, which was subsequently pulled, and people didn't really respond to it well because it was just so graphic and so over the top. And something that I think we need to understand that as we are putting out our message and presenting ourselves, we have to do it in a way that it's going to be received by the recipient. And we have to do it in a way that they're going to interpret it the way that we're actually intending that message to go out. And that's something that's I see as very important within cultural diplomacy, and I think that's something we all kind of need to consider.
Can you pass the mic up forward? There we go. Go ahead. Yeah. No, right next
I don't know what protesting has to do with international youth employment, but maybe the youth can get a job protesting, I don't know. But I guess back to the Wall Street movement, if they weren't making such an impact, why were they suppressed? Why were they kicked out of the shanty homes? Why were the pepper spray? Why in New York City they went in there during the dark and didn't let the reporters in there? This is a question for everybody, I guess.
Yeah, they didn't ask me about it. Here, go ahead.
Yeah.
No, didn't you want to speak? Yes.
Thank you very much, Cindy. I think that to me it was a great comfort, intellectual comfort, this discussion. We were talking about the culture of protest. It is a part of political culture, or it is a part of a general, set of values, of cultures. We have to decide, because other way we'll do like Arthur Schlesinger said, politicians are using very often the history, but very often they abusing the history. We are using the right to speak, but we're not abusing. Who decide where is the line, where is the red line as a negotiation, And this is currently, this is a problem for everyone, because we are living in a world which is in a transition. Cynthia, you did mention a book. I would like to recommend you 2 weeks ago, was at least, Jeremy Rifkin book on the third industrial revolution. It is about the huge transformation we are living in today. What means this transition? It's a confusion of the values. Why culture and why cultural diplomacy is so important today? Because cultural diplomacy requests to use values. We are, unfortunately, in the last 20 years, perhaps 30 years, we were living in a world, especially I'm talking here about Europe, which the main value was a mercantile one. We Europeans tried to make a god from euro. We didn't succeed. We have to decide what are truly the values we are wanting to live with. And for this reason, I think that to me was very comfortable intellectually, this debate. Thank you very much.
Well, that I think is a great transition. If anyone has some comments on the stated topic. If not, we'll go to YouTube, but the topic that we're actually supposed to be talking about, but personally I think this has been fascinating and I appreciate all your comments, but there was a stated topic of international youth unemployment, which I think relates to what you're saying, and I don't think we can offer cultural diplomacy as a full employment field, but perhaps we can offer it as a kind of guide in that young people today are just going to have to be so open about what they're doing because you're going to change your careers 4 or 5 times. And so the worst thing I think you could do is say, I'm going to do this, you know, because that probably isn't going to happen. But the good news is you don't have all that pressure to go to Wall Street because they don't have any jobs either. So, you know, the world is open and you get to rebond with your parents after college. At least that's what's happening in the United States. It's a whole new social order. It's hard for parents too. So, but in a serious way, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I don't have thoughts. I don't know if the panel has thoughts on international youth unemployment. Maybe Jack does. But we'd love to hear your thoughts and questions on this. Is that what you were going to do, or are we still on protest?
I've been trying to.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. God, I'm ignoring the
yeah.
woman. Oh, that's the worst. I'm always mad when people do that.
Okay.
Really?
I'm Erna Belgin and I come from Finland, and we have had this issue of activists for a long time already because we have forest industry. But nowadays, my background is in communications. This is very much to do with the communications business, and take seriously activists because there will be more and more. So we educate companies, communications people, directors, and they communicate and coach their CEOs. And for example, Stora Enso, which is a very big company in Finland in the forest business, forest industry, has taken into control activists globally and locally. And this is just because they have opened up the dialogue. They are collaborating with the activists, Greenpeace, for example. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah, Jack, did you have a comment? Did you?
I suppose, I mean, I kind of stayed out of the earlier discussion, having been in the middle of it last night. I suppose the one thing I would say about the discussion we've just had is I am not, I don't practice a faith, but I do try and adhere to words that I heard as a very young child in a church, which was, do unto others what you would have them do unto you. And I think it seems to me that's at the essence of the kind of dialogue that we are trying to create. And when we have these kind of incidents, and these things happened to me when I was First Minister, they happened to most politicians at some point, I think it's important to handle them as carefully and diplomatically as possible, and to behave in the way that we want others to behave. So that would be my only, and that's why I let the dialogue go on last night. I didn't try and stop it. I've been looking at this topic, and I've actually been thinking all day, what on earth am I going to say on this panel tonight? Because I couldn't work out the links between the 3 or 4 things that are in the title. But I have thought of one thing, which I would want to say, and that is that almost to turn it round, I am not sure what the role of cultural diplomacy might be in international youth employment, but I do know that international youth unemployment could be a significant barrier to progress on cultural diplomacy. I think that could be true in the developed world, where youth unemployment will raise tensions between different communities, different ethnic communities, indigenous communities and migrant communities and so on. And it will also be true in the developing world, where youth unemployment is a significant barrier to peace building, to post-conflict reconstruction, and youth unemployment can be a significant motivator for returning to conflict. So I'm not sure about the role of cultural diplomacy in international youth employment, but I think the issue of international youth unemployment, which is going to be back on our agenda this decade, and is going to be a more and more difficult issue to tackle over the next 4 or 5 years, I think could be one of the significant barriers to the progress on the kind of ideas we've been discussing here this weekend. And I think alongside what we are all trying to achieve in the warm world of cultural diplomacy, I think there's a hard world out there where jobs, productive work, volunteering perhaps, all kinds of other options that are productive and practical for young people across the world are going to have to be forced onto the international agenda as we work our way through the current financial crisis, not just here in Europe, but the impact it's having elsewhere.
Thank you, Jack. Dr.
Yeah,
Albarra?
I cannot think of an example of cultural diplomacy in youth employment or unemployment. I can talk about youth unemployment. That's something I worked with. But I want to switch to another subject, actually, on how cultural diplomacy, sharing a small experience which we had in combating violence against women. And what we did in Bahrain, I was part of a group which we established with the UNDP, what we call Men's Network for the combat of violence against women. And what we find in Bahrain was that although there is no very much physical violence against women, but there was a lot of psychological and silence violence against women, whether it is in work or in house or in any area. So what we did with UNDP, we created this men's network, which we have combined religious people, people from parliament, politicians, businessmen, it's all men. The whole idea is to spread the practice of dealing with this issue and how it could be dealt with in a different manner, because these are the main actors in actually in affecting or combating the violence against women. And UNDP took that initiative to actually to another country, which they created another network. So it was a small experience, but I think cultural diplomacy really worked because it's different people from different backgrounds, and we're just exchanging ideas. And then we put a program. So we went through the media to address these issues. We went and visited, we created shelters, etc., and we visited those exposed, at least, those women that have been really been violated, whether it is in work, whether harassed, or whether also in houses, in case there is violence from the husband or from others. Thank you.
That is such a fascinating story. It's fascinating. Thank you for telling us that. I think we take maybe just one question after this. Okay, I see someone's waving the mic, serious about it. Okay, and if there's someone else who feels strongly about speaking after that, first here and then there. Otherwise, I think it's about time to wind down, but I'm open some flail if someone else is eager to add something. Okay, go ahead.
I'm Jackie Modeste.
Get closer to your...
I'm Jackie Modeste, and I couldn't help but thinking about last night all day today. And coalescing some of the ideas that I've heard today, a couple of things. One is that this dialogue is so useful because we need to assess what happened, and we need to hear the different opinions on how last night was handled and the different perceptions, and that is crucial. To the point of conflict resolution, one of the things I couldn't help thinking was people protest when they think they're not being heard. And so for the young woman who is so adamant in getting her point across that she trespassed and did all these things that she did that are legally, improper and, maybe ethically improper in some ways, she wanted to be heard. And so one of the things that we can do in terms of working in cultural diplomacy and conflict resolution is to make sure we are listening to people before the crisis arises. And I like the example of Finland employing some of the protesters, because that means people with grievances have real positions of authority and can have an ear to the ground when conflicts or tensions arise, so we can diffuse these situations before they come to the level of certainly violent protests, let's say. to the point of youth unemployment. So what I would think is that in terms of conflict resolution as well, we might find areas or ways to employ our youth within corporations, nonprofit organizations, across the board, in universities. You know, the university out in Blacksburg, University of West Virginia, or
Virginia Tech.
Virginia Tech, just had another violent incident. So we might employ our youth across sectors in different industries to be people-to-people mediators and actually listening to people. I work in the arts and with music as well, and listening is very important in music. So I think if we employ people in the service of listening to other people, we might be able to diffuse situations before they become as volatile as last night did, because they protested, because they were not being heard. That's all.
Okay, there was another, go ahead.
Okay, should I?
Yeah, stand up.
I don't want to touch on this too long because we've been going around for a while on this one subject. I do want to get to the topic and question, but I just wanted to say that last night and previous days we've been talking about equal input and output from individuals in the dialogue around the round table, so to speak, between individuals with a conflict. And I feel that as fair as it would have been for them to continue their discussion, it didn't seem like a discussion from the beginning because ears were already closed in some way. It was getting a point across, and as soon as the point was made, they kind of decided that that was all that they wanted to say and all they wanted to hear. So from my point of view, it was excellent to be able to give them that opportunity to have a voice, but at the same time, dialogue isn't always about the answer to problems. It's about having a dialogue and creating a dialogue and creating a certain peace of mind from being able to maintain a dialogue between the person you're having a conflict with. So I guess in getting to my point, the dialogue was the important piece of that and not the answer to the problem. And I feel that both sides were wrong in their reaction to the dialogue. And it might not have been hurting the ICD had we been able to carry on the dialogue, because a certain conflict resolution may have arisen from that unpredicted event that occurred. In getting to international youth employment and the role of cultural diplomacy, in my country specifically, I see it happening more and more, the United States, I'm sorry, with illegal immigrants, which have been at times persecuted by certain individuals. President Obama has sort of stepped up in recent days in trying to give some of those immigrants legitimacy in maintaining their employment and staying in the United States, even though perhaps the first generation came in illegally, their children are being allowed to stay, or they're being given citizenship to work. And I feel like our generation, I was having a discussion with someone at our dinner last night about what defines a generation, and I feel like our generation is so much defined by the fact that we realize that we are all so interconnected and that we all need to be more aware of each other and how we can connect with each other. And I feel that's through language, like learning different languages, that's through doing Erasmus programs, that's through doing inter-religious dialogue, you know, all of these things. I don't know if that's just from my perspective, but I see it happening more and more, and I feel that there in itself is cultural diplomacy. So I guess that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a
Sorry, that was very long-winded, but
a very interesting comments. You go ahead, and then we'll go here.
Yeah, I just had a point to add, really, just speaking from the position of a recent graduate. It seems that the morals seem to be a bit out of balance when it comes to sort of my government in the UK and the EU encouraging education, because it seems we get a lot of funding, a lot of encouragement to go through higher education, university, masters, and then once you graduate, everything stops. That's it. You drop off the face of the earth, and if you don't get a job, it's your problem. An option that some people then take is to go into, say, like more lucrative areas of the private sector and the financial sector, which isn't necessarily what they want to do, but you know, that's where the money is, and you know, they feel that they've invested so much in their education that they then feel they have to do this. And it's a shame that there isn't yet still a little bit more funding and support just after graduation to support people so that they do have the choice to do what they want to do with their degree. it seems like we've been forced to fly the nest a bit too quickly. Like, we're supported right up until, you know, the point at which we really want to do something, and then we're just left to fend for ourselves.
That's a really interesting comment, and of course that phenomenon of people who've graduated from college, done everything right, and then were not able to find employment was a serious undercurrent in the revolutions in Egypt and Tunisia. So, you know, the other countries should beware. That was a very real factor. And I know we have this in the United States, I don't know if it's true elsewhere, where there's now almost a practice that upon graduating you're going to do an unpaid internship. And that's, of course, a totally elitist thing, because only, I don't know, well, it's not ICD's fault. They're not the U.S. Senate. We are not blaming ICD in this. They kill themselves. They don't even pay themselves. It's totally not their fault. But this happens in the U.S. Senate. This happens in companies. This happens all over the place. And it's such a bizarrely elitist thing, because only people whose parents have the means to support them for another year can do that. And if that goes on and on and on without the kind of programs you're talking about, it's only going to widen the ever-widening gap in our societies.
I have to add something, because I think you have changed a little the thematic of this meeting here, because the main problem was linked to civil society, and during these days we have discussed about the different components. We have discussed about the role of private sector, business. We have discussed about the role of universities and this mediatic role, the role of academies, and we didn't say anything about another community, which is religious communities. And the religious communities, I believe, they have to play an important role on cultural diplomacy. I can bring you two examples. In Albania at 97, we have had a serious crisis linked to the fall of pyramidal schemes there, and the revolt of Albanians have been quite a powerful one. And our communities, religious communities, quite liberal communities, Muslims of both kinds, the Orthodox community and the Catholic community, they've been together to put the calm to Albanian population. And they've used this cultural diplomacy for avoiding any kind of civil war within Albanian society. So this was a positive example, and we have to consider this example in any different cases. Of course, I'm not speaking about fundamentalist leaders. I'm speaking about the communities, religious communities, where they are exerting this normal religion. They can play an important role. I believe on that. And this was the example of Albania. And there was another example. I remember it was during the Bush presidency. It gave a big quantity of money to religious communities, to the churches, for doing an important job on social activities. And the result was quite a successful one. Was, quite a kind of experience, which maybe was borrowed by United Kingdom. In the United Kingdom, this was done 1 century before and was quite successful. So we have another component to be considered, to be studied, and maybe to be included in different contacts and meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that addition. You go ahead.
I just want to add something to what you said, Amy, earlier. Yes, after we graduated, obviously we have not a lot of choice to find a job. But what's annoying me a lot is that when you're looking for a job, they ask you a first experience. And I assume this is a tricky situation because you don't have first experience before someone gives you a chance to have first experience. So what I heard from my parents and from my grandparents before is that before the companies used to train the employees and take time to form them to be a good employee in their company. And now we don't have this kind of training anymore. So this is a shame, and maybe governments can do something for that, or maybe a pressure coming from civil society, or maybe a pressure coming from us. We never know. And I wanted to add a comment on the protesting. I think today it's difficult to express yourself, and maybe, yes, there is good way and wrong way to do it, but it's really difficult if you want to address an issue and make sure to be heard and make sure to have an impact. It's like there is no real space, no real platform to be heard and to have, like, to reach a solution, or to be, I don't know how to say that, but to succeed in your action. And this alternative way to do it, I don't say it's good, I don't say it's bad, but like at some point you're forced to act violently. That's what we discussed lately. And this is not a good way. Violence is never a good way, but we, at some point, they're forced to act like this, and maybe it's a shame, but like we need to put ourselves into question and question society we're living on. They're forced you to act with violence, and that's it. That's my point.
Okay. Mark wanted to speak, and Nazar, can we have the mic over here?
Sure, just going back to the topic of international youth employment, I think one of the great opportunities for cultural diplomacy is also when one looks at migration flows, immigration flows, etc., for youth who want to work internationally. Very often there are many blocks that actually make that impossible. So I think that's also something that I'd like to work more in the field of cultural diplomacy, how cultural diplomacy can have an impact on migration policies, immigration policies, even just that practical issue of visas, whether it's to study abroad, etc. So often there's discrimination that takes place at every level, whether it's the companies themselves or the countries. So I think that's another opportunity in terms of international youth employment where cultural diplomacy could have an impact. So just something I know it's the end of the discussion now, but something for us to think about where I think a lot of work could be done.
Yeah, I'll go back to the unemployment and cultural diplomacy. I thought of a good example of that. In Bahrain, we had a problem of unemployment, especially with the graduate from university. And there was a number of 1,912 unemployed graduates. Those actually, in Bahrain, the number is big because the population is small. The majority of those are female. I mean, out of this 1912, there were about less than 400 are male, the rest are female. And so that was one. The second thing was there noticeable that the majority of them are graduate with social sciences. And people don't want social science. They want engineers, they want accountants, etc. So it lied in my back to take that responsibility. So first of all, companies, the private sector doesn't want to employ them because they prefer male over female. Secondly, they don't want them because they don't have the right qualifications. So we have to bridge that gap. But the first task, I have divided them into a group. First of all, the graduates, the female. The male don't have a problem because we train them and we find them jobs, but the female. And also the third problem that all of those, majority of them come from a very conservative background. That means their husband, they want them to go and work with men, they have this and that, they have a lot of problems there. So the first thing is to first contact with them. So divide them into 100, 100, 100. I met with each 100 face to face and get their response first of all. So first of all is to break that barrier, and so that they think that, okay, somebody is hearing us, and not somebody who's in charge, a minister, not anybody, but somebody they think that he can take the decision. So that was the first part. The second part was to go to the employers and try to convince them Now how to employ those. So we designed a scheme in which we said that, okay, we're going to pay the salary for 1 year. We're going to train them and place them in your job for 1 year. After a year, the second year, if you're happy with them, after a year, they will get used to the work, etc. If you're happy with them, then we can go into the second year and we'll pay half of the salary. And then after that, they can have a full contract. Am I taking a lot of time? Or?
It's okay. I think we're all learning something. It sounds
Okay.
very interesting.
So that's the second problem. Now the third problem is this barrier. I cite just one example of that. Not just a mental barrier, but you can say the influence, the other influence, which is basically a lot of it is from the husband. Because all of this, they were unemployed for 5 years, they get married, they have children, some of them, so we have to take care of all of that. So I remember, just to cite one example, that we had to actually convince the husband that these ladies are capable of working and are capable also of dealing with the environment which they have. I remember one time, after of course, we put them into groups and then we start training them and they come with their husband and, convince them, etc. Some of them convinced, some of them not convinced. So you have to go into a sort of a dialogue even with the husband. It's not painful, but what's important is that here you have to deal in one-to-one basis. And that's the only way to do it. But after you finish that, the next batch will be totally changed because the whole idea is spread that, okay, this barrier is gone, this barrier is gone, this barrier is gone. Just one example, I had one lady, I was in my office and my assistant was outside and I was hearing some shouting. So I went out and I saw this man was saying to my assistant that, look, I don't want her to work here or any place. I want her to work in a school where there's only ladies, and I don't want her to mix with others. I said to him, I came out and said, look, first of all, my assistant is a lady, and she is working there. She will be working with ladies. Anyhow, to cut the long story short, I said, okay, I'll take her with me, and I'll place her in one of the organizations which I have. This lady, I first interviewed her, very smart, because she is scarred and everything, but very smart. Anyhow, she was silent, totally silent. And the man was totally speaking, and she was saying nothing. After just 2 months working, when the man came, she was talking, and he was silent.
Yeah.
She was empowered. Now, she was talking because she knows that she's earning her money, and now he has to listen because she has a voice. So
excellent. I think we might have a job for you in Great Britain. Well, that is a great example. I see one hand up from someone who hasn't spoken, then I think we'll make this the last comment.
Cynthia, I just want to add one thing.
Oh, sure, Ruman.
I heard your comment regarding cultural diplomacy and youth employment. When I came up with this title for this lecture, actually it was supposed to be cultural diplomacy, the private sector and civil society, and then ... international youth unemployment, and the role of cultural diplomacy. We took away the "un" and we just left it with youth employment. And I just want to explain to you all what stands behind this title. So you will all be able to understand why we came up with this title. Cultural diplomacy, or actually diplomacy between cultures, offers a set of practices for groups and communities, and they can come from different from different countries. They can come from different cities. They can come from even at some point maybe from a different star, to actually communicate between themselves. And this set of practices is actually what I planned to hear here, while we have here a group of young people. Actually, I didn't want to speak about what does it mean to youth employment, because I guess that everybody here understands. Yeah, it's difficult. You need to have experience, and it's very, very difficult to get a job, and a well-paid job, and a well-paid job with benefits. All of those things are very clear. What we try to do here is to show you how cultural diplomacy can help, and how this set of practices can help you to understand that you actually, the youth of the youth is standing in a situation. Actually, everybody, let's say every country has a problem with employment. It's not only for the youth, but we wanted to touch the youth for a reason, because ICD is close to young leaders, and most of our activities is together with young people. So we chose this group, and we just wanted to see to tell you that what we need to think is actually how this group of youth how can they use better cultural diplomacy practices in order to have a dialogue with the other groups that actually can help them with this problem of youth employment. And I'm talking about the group of the super rich. Those people, the super rich, have a completely other set of values. They will come and they will tell you all kind of suggestions what you should do in order to get a job. But sometimes this is exactly the problem. You need to come up to this group and explain to this group what it means, to be in your group. So actually, if you can come to another group, and this is the group of the politicians. ICD is very much engaged with the politicians, because we feel that the politicians is the first group of people that we would like to give them those practices of cultural diplomacy in order for them to implement them in their daily work, and be able to simply make a better dialogue with other groups. So in general, what we try to do here is the dialogue that we wanted to have here is about what are the practices and what kind of a dialogue we should have if I'm representing the youth with other groups. This is what we meant, and how to do this dialogue. And Dr. Nazar also touched with another issue, which is actually hidden, and this is some kind of a sub-issue that we need to deal, that for this specific group of youth in different countries in this world, you can also have some cultural problems. For example, the differences between female and male. For example, here, you will not have usually, so you're supposed not to have in Western societies those problems between female and male, although it does exist. It does exist. So another thing is, as I said, the cultural issues can also be observed here in this panel discussion that we wanted to discuss this time. I guess that our first, actually 75% of this dialogue was about the dialogue, and I think that it is important. It doesn't matter how do you discuss dialogue, as long as you discuss how to do a dialogue, we feel that we did right, and you already see how difficult it is to discuss dialogue in a respectful way. That's it.
Thank you, Riemann. We'll just take the final
Yes,
comment.
Marina from Bulgaria. I'll be very short. 90% of the young people in Bulgaria are working while they're studying, though have the time only to study. It's a luxury, and I just want to tell you it's possible.
Yeah.
It's possible to work and study, and then you don't have a problem to find a job.
Yes, it's true. Many students in America are doing the same. Well, okay, so there are a lot of people working and studying. So there is fruit for discussion over dinner. Everybody's working, everybody's discussing. Good, good, good. I just want to thank, can you guys be quiet for just one sec? I just want to thank, and I want you all to thank Mark and Riemann and the ICD group and family for allowing us to have and facilitating and engaging in this very open discussion. I think it was the embodiment of what cultural diplomacy is, so thank you very much.
So yeah, just another word of thanks also for Cynthia for the great moderation, and actually for all of the time and energy you've spent also the last few days moderating, speaking, etc. So maybe thanks to Cynthia and also to the panelists and the speakers who are still with us. Maybe we could give one more round of applause. Thank you.